prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. This was the morning we've been leading up to this week, talking about the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel would speak to a joint session of Congress. That happened this morning. Many of you may have watched or listened to that speech, although you could be forgiven for not doing so since the broadcast networks didn't carry it. Later in the program, we're going to speak with James Hirsen, who he does a Hollywood sort of a blog, and he talks about different movies and television programs. It's called the Left Coast Report, and it's affiliated with Newsmax.com. He's going to join me, and I'm going to ask him about this fact that broadcast networks did not carry the speech, and certainly, as we know, many Democrats and the administration were against the fact that this even took place. We'll talk with him about that, and also a television show with, remember Home Improvement's Tim Allen, who's actually become a very successful actor. He's the star of a television show that's now been running for 4 years. It's a series, and it's very conservative, which is quite interesting for Hollywood. We'll talk to James Hirsen about that. Later in the program, we're going to recap the speech. We've got a lot of audio from it, and then we're going to speak with a couple of people. Louie Gohmert will join us later in the program, Congressman from Texas. And he was there in the House at the joint session meeting, listening to this speech. So we'll hear from him. And then Dale Hanson Bourke will join us also. She's an author and a prominent Christian activist. And I will be so happy to hear from you too, ladies and gentlemen. If any of you heard the speech or have heard the recaps of it, what you thought of it. Did you think that this was a disrespectful speech to the White House? Do you think that he made a case that would convince members of Congress that were wavering to support or not support the deal with Iran that seems to be taking shape and forming even as we speak? And I would just love to hear what you thought about it. We'll open the phones a little bit later in the program, and we'll ask you to call in. So that's going to be today's show. And I thought this speech was well done. It was strong. It was respectful. And Benjamin Netanyahu started out saying that the U.S. Congress is the most important legislative body in the world. And he said, and of course he knows about the controversy that took place about his coming. He said it was never his intention and that his being here is not political. And of course that's referring not only to a preference for any political party in the United States, but also it refers to the fact that in about 3 weeks, there's an election in Israel, and a lot of people have accused him of taking the invitation to come and speak here as a way to influence politics there in his own country. But he did say that the alliance between the United States and Israel must always remain above politics. And he talked about how he's grateful for America's presidents. And it was interesting because that refers to probably many presidents, but one is Harry Truman. And, back in Israel, of course, when Israel was formed in 1948, Harry Truman was the president who presided over that. George Marshall was the Secretary of State. And at that time, Harry Truman was being lobbied to recognize Israel. But the Secretary of State Marshall was not exactly for that. He thought it was not a good idea. But Truman went ahead and recognized the state of Israel. It was we were the first country to do so. And so he did the right thing, of course. And he did it in a very clear and simple manner. He said that it was, he was a Bible reader, first of all, and he thought Jews had a moral claim to what was then Palestine. And he wanted to make sure people didn't think this was some sort of a gift because of the Holocaust to make up for it or something. Of course, it was political, too. He needed the Jewish vote. But Marshall criticized him. And Marshall said that the United States was risking its position and prestige in the Middle East just to placate a domestic lobby, and that it was actually very risky. And I think that's what a lot of people are saying now, that we need to make a deal with Iran because they're the ones with the oil and they're the ones with the power. And, you wonder why this administration would negotiate and lift sanctions or even think about doing so against Iran. This is why, because there are a lot of pressures and a lot of people who think that our relationship with Iran or with Israel is only just because we like them, and it's not really strategic. This little bit of commentary is thanks to Richard Cohen of the Washington Post. No conservative, but I thought that was an interesting point. Well, let's go back to the speech. As a matter of fact, let's hear a little bit of it. The Prime Minister Netanyahu said in the speech that the Obama administration is wrong to seek a deal that, for all its good intentions, leaves Iran with a large nuclear program.
It doesn't block Iran's path to the bomb. It paves Iran's path to the bomb. So why would anyone make this deal?
That's the question a lot of us are asking. We've been asking it in the run-up to this speech, and we've been wondering, why would a country that cared about its own national security make this deal? I mean, we've done a lot better when we've been the strong one as far as nuclear weapons. And when you think about it, and Netanyahu mentioned this later in his speech, once they get the bomb and start building their nuclear capability, there'll be all kinds of countries in the Middle East who will do so, and it will become chaotic. So that was sort of an opening shot on things. But Iran's quest for nuclear weapons it's unmistakable. And one thing that Netanyahu mentioned is that the holiday, or that the celebration, the Jewish celebration of Purim, is tomorrow. And this was mentioned by one of our callers yesterday. Queen Esther, of course, gave the Jewish people the right to defend against the threats against them. And so Netanyahu equated what's going on now with that. And I thought that was quite interesting. And he was speaking of another Persian potentate that Queen Esther actually was married to. And of course, we're dealing with one in Iran, the leader of Iran. And he did say that the Iranian leader really has great hatred for the Jews, and he's been very vocal about that. Some people have said that he is a moderate, but Netanyahu says that he is no moderate. He actually mentioned some tweets that he has put out saying that the United States must be destroyed. But again, we'll continue to talk about this later in the program. Before we do that, though, I'm going to bring in a guest in the next segment. We're going to kind of move off and talk a little bit about Hollywood. James Hirsen will join me, but I will also ask him what he thinks about the fact that only you had to go to cable basically to watch this speech, and why the broadcast networks didn't carry Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech to Congress. And we're going to ask for your call, so get ready. Start to think about what you thought about the speech. If you haven't heard it, then you might just listen to some of the sound bites as we go through the program. We're going to continue to bring you that news. It was an interesting day, and I think he was very informative, and I think he made a good case, but it's probably going to be a very partisan decision, and certainly this White House sometimes doesn't care what Congress has to say anyway. Very interesting that John Kerry is in Geneva negotiating this deal with Iran as we speak. We've got a lot to talk about today on Point of View, so stick with us. We'll be right back.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
You know, I have noticed over the last few months that a number of commentators have been trying to minimize the threat from terrorism. Perhaps they're doing it because they don't want us to overreact to the social media videos of burnings and beheadings. Some may not want America to be drawn into another war. Whatever the reason, there seems to be a concerted effort to minimize the terrorist threat. One writer calculated that since 9/11, a grand total of 30 Americans have been killed in terrorist incidents inside the United States. The odds of an American being killed by terrorism are lower than being killed in a car accident or killed in a building fire. He added that Americans are 4 times more likely to be struck by lightning than killed by a terrorist. Now, if you believe the United States is spending too much in terms of blood and treasure fighting terrorism, you could use this argument. Of course, you could have made the same argument in America before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. How many Americans were killed by the Axis powers in the 1930s? Your chances of being killed by Nazi soldiers or soldiers of the Japanese Imperial Army were effectively 0. Even after 9/11, you could make the case that most Americans and nearly all of our other cities were unaffected by the terrorist attack on that day. You could even point to the fact that except for the World Trade Towers and part of the Pentagon, all the other buildings in America were intact and unaffected by the 9/11 terrorist attack. Charles Cook uses an extreme example to make his point. Imagine that 100 planes crashed into other important business and government buildings. That would have been devastating. But still, most of the homes, churches, libraries, malls, hotels, and gas stations would be intact. Would the citizens of America have been comforted if George W. Bush appeared on TV to say that America was still, statistically speaking, safe and unaffected by the events of the day? We shouldn't overreact to the threat of terrorism, but we don't need to use statistical arguments to minimize the threat either. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. Of course, the big news of the day is Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech to the joint session of Congress. We're going to veer off and talk about Hollywood and entertainment for a moment now. My guest is James Hirsen, JD and MA in media psychology. He's also a New York Times best-selling author. His book is Tales from the Left Coast. He's appeared on lots of media, and he's a pundit for Newsmax.com and an author of the popular weekly column, The Left Coast Report. James, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, great to be with you, Penna. How are you?
I'm great. I haven't talked to you in a while. And I caught one of your columns and wanted to talk about it. But first, I want to ask you, because certainly everyone's aware that Netanyahu gave a speech this morning, but the broadcast networks didn't carry it. I mean, I watched it on Fox. I know other people around here at the studio watched it on various websites. And do you have any thoughts about why the broadcast networks did not carry it?
Well, the obvious thought that comes to mind is that they're biased and that they support the administration, and that this was an affront to the administration, but nonetheless it was an historic event, and under any kind of normal circumstances, the broadcast networks would have carried it. And we'll have to see what they do on the nightly news, how much coverage and the type of coverage they do. I did notice that the networks heavily covered Susan Rice's speech at AIPAC to counter Netanyahu's speech yesterday.
Did they cover Netanyahu's speech there?
Well, they did it by, presenting it as a point and counterpoint. It seems like they do the bidding of the administration, and we've had numerous reports in the past that there's all these communications that go on, especially between the news divisions and people that work in the administration. And it just makes sense to me when this is, in fact, at least it's perceived as such an important media event, a PR event, that someone told the networks, "Hey, we don't want you to cover this." And here are the talking points from our side, and so and basically the talking points are that Iran can be contained with strong and intelligent negotiation. And by the way, the negotiations are neither strong nor intelligent. And so I think what Netanyahu did was provide a tremendous service to our nation by making it a very good, move to at least a significant number of people being aware of the crisis that currently exists in the Middle East with respect to Iran, not just their nuclear program, but their state-sponsored terrorism and their influence on regimes all over the Middle East, and so and their expansionist plans. And so I think that he did a service to the world, but a service to our country, and I commend the House of Representatives and John Boehner for doing this. I think it took a lot of guts to do it, and it's being called a stunt by spokespeople from the Democratic Party.
I'm not sure that's playing well.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's anyone that, Netanyahu is a gifted speaker of the Ronald Reagan variety, and anyone that sees any soundbite they put together of him, he comes across as warm, direct, clear, and honest. And he's speaking factually. He's not talking about platitudes and opinions like we hear from the other side. And so I think in a lot of the facts that he brings out in his speech are things that are not reported in the news media. So I think it's a wonderful thing, and and it was, there's a significant portion of the Democratic members of the House and Senate who are supporters of Netanyahu and who responded. You could see
that was very obvious, wasn't it?
It was, the applause was thunderous. It was the kind of applause that a single party would give to their own president, but both parties gave. It was cordial and warm, and as it should be with our strongest ally in that region. I think, they talk about, we have a special relationship, for example, with Great Britain. It's almost a familial relationship. Well, I think the only other countries in the world that we have that relationship with are Israel, and to some extent, we have that with Japan. And so we treat those countries differently, and there's also a familial relationship with Israel because of the relationship that the majority of Americans who are self-identified Christians have with the Jewish people, because those of us that are Christian, and I am a Christian, our Lord came from this group of people, and our heritage is sometimes called Judeo-Christian. Well, it is, and so this is important on so many levels, and so that's why it's the big story of the day.
Yeah, and I've observed as I was watching it how media friendly he really is. I'd kind of forgotten, but he is, and he also was complimentary. He tried to present himself as bipartisan, greeting Harry Reid, saying he was glad he was back from his injuries, talking about how President Obama had done a lot for him and a lot of things that we don't even know about that aren't public. I thought those were gracious, and certainly they were meant to diffuse some of the criticism that he is, aligned with the Republican Party in the United States. And so, that was a wise move. I think he's a wise guy in the way he presents himself, and I was pleased to see the way he carried it off today, too.
Yeah, I mean, Israeli politics are not unlike American politics. It takes great savvy to be the prime minister for 9 years, as he's done, and he showed. And I think you hit the right word. He was gracious, and it came across as real. And so I think he's engaging. He's telegenic, and he was educated here, and it really helps because he has, he's as a master of the language, and So it was, it's a home run for him and a lot of people. I mean, that's why that, as you pointed out, this trying to characterize it as a stunt doesn't play well, because it was so well done and it was filled with facts. And you can't, I mean, I know people do argue with facts, but they're compelling facts, and it's reality. And it reminds me, it's funny because the gift that John Boehner gave him was a bust of Winston Churchill, and people have called him Churchillian, and that speech was Churchillian because it was like a warning, the kind of speeches Churchill made in the World War II, pre-World War II and World War II era. And that's, we're in a world war right now, essentially, but we can easily find ourselves in a much hotter war if we don't take strong measures. That the kind of negotiation that the administration is doing appears to be more like comparison to Neville Chamberlain than it does to Winston Churchill.
Yes, this was the third time that Netanyahu had spoken before Congress, just like Churchill spoke before Congress 3 times surrounding World War II, as James Hirsen points out. James, we only have about a minute before the break, so we'll have to continue the discussion of Tim Allen's show after the break, but I just want to get you started on it because I didn't know this. I don't watch much television. I'm just too busy at night sometimes to do that. But I wasn't aware of this television show, The Last Man Standing. Tim Allen, who's not personally a conservative, but this show is conservative. And is it a parody or is it really conservative?
No, it really is. Actually, Tim Allen used to be a closet conservative, but he actually is a conservative who has done, get this, fundraising for a GOP presidential candidate.
Oh, so he is a conservative personally, too.
He is a conservative,
okay.
And you can, and he's a hardworking, kind of quiet guy. That's why people don't know much about him or his politics. He's done these movies like Toy Story and Santa Claus, and he did Home Improvement. But you can kind of see a pattern of, a little bit more wholesome kind of. Now, I can't say 100%, but a little bit more family-friendly programming. But Last Man Standing has political content that is not only unexpected, but upsets people in Hollywood, and particularly the television critics, and even upsets the executives at ABC. It's
even though they've got the top ratings on Friday nights.
Well, that's the thing that caught my attention. It's been like 8 straight weeks they've had the top ratings.
Okay.
That's the thing. That's a current story.
Pretty exciting. Hey, we'll continue this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, if you watch the show, we'll let you call in, 2-800-351-1212. James Hirsen is my guest. We'll be right back.
Maybe you've noticed, but Christians find many things to disagree about. But one thing that all true Christians do is pray. Point of View Radio has a plan to help you join with your family from sea to shining sea and pray for America. It starts by getting our new booklet, Pray for America, and we'll also send you occasional reminders and updates on special needs to pray for. One need that we know about is to pray for the Supreme Court. Over the next few months, they're considering the definition of marriage and whether or not to force every state to accept the fiction of so-called same-sex marriage. When the foundation of your house is compromised, the entire structure is in danger, and this decision may seriously undermine our culture's foundation and fuel a growing attack on religious freedom. Please visit our website. Look for the Pray for America picture on the right side of our homepage. You may have to scroll down just a bit. pointofview.net. Join people all across the land and pray for America. Visit right now, pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And my guest is James Hirsen. He is the author, well, among other things, he is the author of the Left Coast Report. I forgot to mention that he also teaches law at Trinity Law School and Biola University in Southern California. I was just out there a couple of weeks ago, James, and it's so beautiful. So beautiful out there. I grew up there, and so it's kind of fun to go back.
A little dry, though. It's just a little dry, but it is beautiful.
Yeah, a little dry. A little wet here, a little cold in most of the country. But James Hirsen is warming things up today on Point of View. And tell us a little bit about this show. I know it's Tim Allen, of course, is the star of Last Man Standing on ABC. And he plays Mike Baxter. And it sounds a little bit like a Home Improvement type of personality.
It's similar to Home Improvement in the sense that Mike Baxter works for a sporting goods chain. And there's kind of characters that are similar to Home Improvement. But the key thing with Mike Baxter, and I mentioned Tim Allen, it apparently uses Mike Baxter as his political voice because he himself is right of center, as he describes himself. And so Mike Baxter is a married man with 3 daughters. And so he's struggling to maintain his definition of a man, which is traditional, a masculine man. And he's constantly having political discussions with his wife, mildly feminist wife, and his radical daughter, who's married to a liberal. And so they have discussions kind of like you see on cable shows, except with jokes placed in. Now, one of his daughters shares his worldview, and particularly she likes the military and firearms. She's a member of the junior ROTC. I think she's in high school. And so she wears camouflage all the time. She's a fan of the military. And so the discussions are amazing. And what's interesting is when there's, look, we have a media that is filled with left-wing messages and cultural debauchery and things that really don't fit with American values whatsoever. And when those kinds of shows are on that push the cultural edge, the critics uniformly heap praise on them. But this show, because of the fact that there's discussion about global warming, the Affordable Care Act, ISIS, the administration's policies, and Mike Baxter, Tim Allen's character, is constantly slamming the president's policies in very entertaining ways, while the critics react with this amazing emotional reaction.
I can only imagine.
My favorite one is GQ. A critic from GQ said that this show, and they were talking about the pilot, that it was utterly dismal, that it crammed Islamophobia, homophobia, and the phrase Obamacare into 22 minutes, completing a cosmic red state hat trick.
Wow.
So it's like, basically, they got angry, and there were a number of...
They get one show, and the rest of TV is liberal.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and there's a few, like Duck Dynasty, which the critics hate, too, which is a reality show. But
the Duggars.
Yeah, the Duggars. There's a few. But for the most part, television for people who share Christian values is a vast wasteland, and who share conservative values. But, like, for example, this is a line that Mike Baxter, Tim Allen's character, said a couple of years ago that sort of is the quintessential line of the show. It shows you what kind of sassy kind of show it is. He's explaining to his daughters. They're talking about the coming election, and he says, well, let me put this in perspective with the inheritance tax. One day I'm going to die, and I'll split things up and give it to you guys. The Democrats will tax that inheritance and probably use that money to throw gay weddings for illegal aliens.
Yikes.
Now, That's pretty edgy, and that's the kind of content that he's had that's upset people. And by the way, Friday night is a place you send shows to die. It is a hard place to make it. And like I mentioned, it was just in the ratings that ABC has had 8 weeks at number one on Friday night due to Last Man Standing. And so its debut was like one of the top debut sitcoms. There's not that many sitcoms on these days. And it's in its 4th season, but there are people that just, want to kill it. And Alan's let it be known that he's been in a struggle with some of the content with the executives at ABC. In particular, there was a script that
So they like the money, they like the ratings, but they still censor some of the content.
Yeah, well, they fight with him, and they did. They censored the one he revealed. They censor a lot of stuff. I mean, you can see how much they push the edge here. But there was one where he was going to have his character, Mike Baxter, refer to the president as a communist. He thought, and I'm sure it was in a humorous context, but the ABC brass bristled at that, and they got in a struggle. And he talked about it actually on The Tonight Show, Tim Allen did. But he lost that battle, and he said, the network has made me be in a politically correct mode. Well, within the mode he's in, he has a lot of political incorrectness. So I'm happy to see that. And Tim Allen is a man, much like Robert Downey Jr., he's had a checkered past. He had an addiction problem. He overcame that problem. He's a bit inspirational, and he's a super hardworking guy, and so I'm happy to see him successful.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing it to our attention. I really appreciate it. I do want to ask you about Brian Williams, because that story has not been out there for a couple of weeks, and I wonder if you have any inside information on what exactly is happening with him.
Well, I don't have, the inside information. I have what sort of the industry scuttlebutt is, and that they believe that NBC wanted to keep him on. They wanted to just have him take a couple of nights off, but things got too hot the way the media was covering it. It was actually strange to me to see the liberal media come down so hard on Brian Williams, who has always been a friend to liberals. But they did.
Why do you think they did?
I'm not sure. I mean, if we're going to get conspiratorial, I think they had the Bill O'Reilly story in their back pocket, and maybe they thought this would tee it up to get Bill O'Reilly. I don't know that to be a fact, but that story, it turned out not to be true. The Bill O'Reilly story, that they were trying to say that he did the same thing Brian Williams did in respect to him 30 years ago when he was a reporter at the Falklands, and that he had talked about that experience. Well, there's an NBC journalist who was there that backed up O'Reilly, so I think that story has died. But I think what NBC is hoping, they've invested so much money in Brian Williams. He's always been number one, even though it's in a declining area. They think that this 6-month suspension, that they can reevaluate. And you can see, we have a very short memory, the public, all of us, because we have so many things to focus on that are more serious than Brian Williams. And whether they can either sneak him back in the chair in 6 months, or they will announce that he has a new role at NBC. Who knows what that would be? Maybe taking over when Stephen Colbert fails, taking over the David Letterman spot, or I kid on that a little bit, or he could go to like a show like the Today Show. That's a softer
I can
show.
see that a little bit.
But he's very good at late night television. He's very comedic. He's a very talented guy, and I think he could, with self-deprecation and with an apology tour.
Yeah, just making fun of all of this instead of taking it as an apology.
But the sad thing is, when people announced Brian Williams lied, the anchor lied, a lot of people I talked to shrugged because they said, well, isn't that the era we live in?
Yeah, that is
era
sad.
of lies. And is NBC really in the news business? I mean, isn't this the company that employs Al Sharpton? Isn't this the company that employs Ed Schultz? and they're worried about this. So we live in a different time than the old days, where people talked about Walter Cronkite being the most trusted man in America.
But I think a lot in the media like to hold on to that, and that's why they were so quick to turn around and turn against him.
I think they hold on to it, but it's a false icon because most Americans don't trust any of them.
James, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been delightful and too long. We'll have to do it again soon.
Thanks, Penna. You have a wonderful day. Great to hear your voice.
You too. Well, next up, we're going to continue to play some audio from Netanyahu's speech. If you want to comment on it, the number is 800-351-1212. We'll be right back with more of Point of View.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I know that my speech has been the subject of much controversy. I deeply regret that some perceive my being here as political. That was never my intention.
Of course, that's Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. He said it's unfortunate that his address to Congress has raised such a fuss, and it certainly has. And, yesterday, I remember as we anticipated the speech, I said that I really fully expected him to make a good case and not be critical of Obama per se, and to be respectful. And I was right for once. I actually was right in my prediction. Then Netanyahu talked about the deal that's being forged and has been over really years, a couple of years, and is now reaching there's sort of a deadline on the 24th of March, and John Kerry, Secretary of State, is over in Geneva with 6 other countries. And what seems to be emerging, Netanyahu says, is far too lenient on an Iran that's repeatedly cheated on nuclear efforts.
Not a single nuclear facility would be demolished. Thousands of centrifuges used to enrich uranium would be left spinning. Thousands more would be temporarily disconnected, but not destroyed.
So they do cheat, but even if they didn't cheat, he says it's time to, he says that really this deal is a bad one, even if they observe it.
That deal will not prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. It would all but guarantee that Iran gets those weapons, lots of them.
That was a pretty ominous statement, and I thought that he made the case well. He kind of went back to some history. He took us back to 1979 when the mullahs took over in Iran, and it was really controlled and has been for the most part by religious zealots since then. At that time, they drafted a new constitution, and he compared their constitution with the U.S. Constitution. And that constitution directed them to fulfill jihad and export the revolution. And that's what they've been doing. They've been backing terrorists throughout the war, throughout the Middle East. And so, when many people hope that Iran is going to join the community of nations, Netanyahu said, Iran is actually busy gobbling up other nations. And, the fact that we're talking about sanctions. The sanctions have been one of the most effective tools to contain Iran, and yet we're talking about backing off on that and allowing some nuclear activity and perhaps clamping down on some. But he doesn't think that that's really going to get us anywhere. As a matter of fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu said the deal doesn't block an Iranian nuclear bomb. It actually paves the way to one.
This deal has 2 major concessions. One, leaving Iran with a vast nuclear program. And 2, lifting the restrictions on that program in about a decade.
He said in his speech that, first of all, we're talking about inspections because that's part of this deal that we're hearing about. And I thought this was very informative. And this is what I liked about it, was that he actually kind of gave some information to people to help them think about this, because inspections are part of this. But he said inspectors document violations. They don't stop them. And that's really true. They can document the violations, but then it's up to the countries to stop them. And he said that not a single nuclear facility would be demolished in this deal, which is a problem. He talked about a short breakout time. And what has been said about the deal that's being negotiated is we're trying to get to the point where it takes at least a year from the time we find out they're developing a nuclear weapon until they have one. But Netanyahu said that's right now that's not the case. He also said that there would be 2 or 3 weeks in some cases if we allow this. And he said that Iran defies inspectors and plays a pretty good game of hide and cheat with them. And he talked about the concessions. He says that in this deal, it really, without giving away secrets, because that was a concern too, that national security secrets would be given away. He said that it leaves Iran with a vast nuclear program. And then the second concession it makes is that the restrictions expire in 10 years. And 10 years, it may seem a long time politically, he said, but it's a very short time when it comes to a country and the life of a country. Well, we've got some calls, and we are taking your calls here at Point of View. Let's go now to Connie in the state of Kentucky. Connie, thank you for calling in.
Yes, thank you.
Did you watch the speech?
I did watch his speech, and I love Israel. Thank the Lord for Israel, our friend and ally. My comment is about John Yarmouth, who is a congressman from Kentucky. He does not speak for me. He was arrogant and rude to Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm so embarrassed that he would act like that.
Tell us what happened.
Pardon me?
Tell us what he did.
Well, when he was giving his comments, the Democratic response,
because I missed that.
Well, you're blessed to have missed it. But what he said, among other things, he said, you can go home now, Netanyahu. We've heard your little speech, and you can go home and do your whatever you do in Israel and do your election. And he just was so disrespectful. And I wanted to say, Netanyahu, you're welcome to my community. He is not speaking for me and many of us. And we need to support Israel and pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Amen.
And, I wanted to make that comment. I think he is from, I'm not sure where Yarmouth is from, maybe Louisville area, but he does not speak for all Kentuckians, I'll just tell you that.
Well, thank you for calling in and giving that piece of information. Also, I know there was a response, and I missed it as I was on my way to the studio, but we appreciate your being part of the program today.
Thank you for taking my call.
Let's take another one from Georgia. This is Joan. Hi, Joan. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, I watched Mr. Netanyahu's speech, and I was thoroughly impressed with him. But what struck me about it was that he seemed to be a present-day Esther pleading for the life of his people. The only difference is he's pleading from a position of strength, and he really doesn't need Ahasuerus to protect him.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that's left out of all of this is, of course, Israel has always, and, when you read the Old Testament, you see God intervening for Israel all the time. And, of course, that's just not part of the conversation except among Christians today. But still, there are so many other cases that can be made for our friendship with Israel. And certainly then we Christians also advocate just simply from a spiritual point of view. We know this is something that we need to do, and we love Israel. We just have that love. And so thank you for bringing up, he even brought up Esther and kind of compared his situation to hers. But that is true, and that was made clear, too, that Israel, if they have to stand alone, they will.
That's right, and I just appreciate the man, and thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you, Joan, for calling in. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue throughout the rest of the program to talk about this. We've got a couple of different guests that will be joining us. Dale Hanson Bourke will, and I noticed from her blog, which is at pointofview.net, that she has spent some time in Israel, and she really understands the situation there, and that's fun to be able to talk with her about that. She'll give us a little bit of background and history of Israel's position there in the Middle East and why they need to be strong and stand against these powers attaining nuclear weapons. And then Louie Gohmert, Congressman and frequent guest here on Point of View, will also join us sometime in the second hour. We will hear from him, and certainly he was there and heard the speech, and I think he'll have an opinion or two. Meanwhile, we need to really think about praying for our country now more than ever. And here's Bob Allen to tell us about it.
Are you ever frustrated with America's leaders? I know. Are you ever not frustrated? So, what are you doing about it? In Proverbs chapter 21, the Spirit of God hits us with this: the king's heart, and we could say the president's heart, the senator's heart, the congressman's heart, the Supreme Court justice's heart, is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wishes. Your prayers unleash the most powerful weapon in the universe. If you're in union with Jesus Christ, your prayers touch God's heart. So again, what are you doing about your frustrations with government? Point of View Radio is spearheading a new effort to get as many as possible to pray for America. It starts when you visit our website, pointofview.net, and click on the Pray for America picture on the right side of the page. We'll send you our Pray for America booklet and updates on things to pray for. We must pray. Click in now to pointofview.net and pray for America. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
The topic of the day: Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has spoken before a joint session of Congress. And, you know, the question that we have to think about is why his appearance is so controversial. And he made a good case for the reason why the deal that's being negotiated right now between the United States and Iran and some other European countries are involved in this. But Netanyahu said that leaving Iran a robust nuclear program, which is what this deal does, we think, from all that's been revealed and uncovered about it. He says leaving that nuclear program would unleash a fearsome arms race in an already dangerous part of the world.
This deal won't be a farewell to arms. It would be a farewell to arms control. And the Middle East would soon be crisscrossed by nuclear tripwires.
I think you have to go to Israel to really understand the geography there. And our next guest, I think, could help us to do that. Her name is Dale Hanson Bourke, and she's an author of many books. And she's also a real activist. She's been on many boards of great organizations like World Vision, International Justice Mission, and others. And she's got these skeptics guides that really kind of take certain current events and make sense of them to us. And that's what I appreciate about it. Dale, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about Israel, because when I look at your blog and I see that you have a lot that shows that you've spent time there and about the geography and really the situation that Israel's in. I was also there for the very first time this fall, and I was struck by how short the distances are between the places that you visit, and also how soon you're in another country that could be, you know, a Muslim country. And so that is why Israel has always had to, for its own preservation, remains strong, and that's why they need a strong leader like Netanyahu to make a speech like he did today, don't they?
Well, yeah, and part of what he wanted to do in that speech was remind, I think, Americans of the vulnerability of Israel and really of the Jewish people in general. He talked about anti-Semitism, the rise of anti-Semitism in the world. He had a Holocaust survivor there to remind us that, you know, in our lifetime, the Holocaust occurred. So part of what he was trying to do was remind us historically that this is not paranoia. This is something that has been, you know, going on for a very long time. And interestingly, some of the data, some of the research shows that some of the younger generation doesn't really perceive anti-Semitism as being an issue in the world, or they see Israel as a very strong country, not needing to be defended. So part of what, you know, I think he's doing was just trying to set the tone and remind us of the vulnerability and the fact, as you say, that it's a very small country in a very bad neighborhood.
Well, I think because we don't teach geography very well right now, that young people could be excused for not knowing the vulnerability geographically.
Well, not only that, I mean, you know, in my lifetime, I remember the 1973 war. I remember when Israel was really under threat of annihilation. And really the younger generation, when you do research with them, they just have seen, you know, the conflicts with Gaza, the conflicts with Lebanon. And in those cases, Israel is clearly stronger than the people that they're, you know, than their foes. And so that's sort of the image that especially the younger generation has. And it's easy to forget, you know, how easy it would be for the other countries around there to simply surround Israel and annihilate it.
So how recently have you been there?
Actually, I was not there last year. I was in Jordan twice last year, which is kind of interesting. I haven't been there for over a year. I'm going back in April.
So when you go, what do you do?
Well, it depends on why I go. I sometimes have gone with a National Geographic tour. Sometimes I've gone to have specific meetings. This time I'm actually going with World Vision with a group of women who are just trying to listen to, what the needs are and listen to other women on the ground. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, listen, I appreciate the fact that you want to help people understand sort of the political situation there. And one of the things that happens, I think, is, and of course, this is in all kinds of controversial subjects, but the terminology gets co-opted by one group or another. Mm-hmm. And we don't, like, for instance, in Israel, the word settlement has a certain connotation.
Right.
And when I was there and saw what the settlements were, I mean, the settlements were places where people lived. They weren't as temporary as that sounds.
I know. I thought that too. The first time I went to Israel, I was looking for little outposts, or little tents or something, and it looked like they're planned communities. I mean, in fact, they call them communities there. They don't really call them settlements. That's sort of a pejorative term if you're in Israel. So yeah, absolutely. Terminology is everything. And that's one of the reasons when I wrote my book, I tried to just explain, even when you use terms, this is what the Israelis would say, this is what the Palestinians would say, this is, sometimes you have to offer 3 or 4 explanations.
You really
for every
do.
term.
You really do. It was interesting when I would look at those settlements driving by or whatever, and they're always at the tops of hills. And of course, the Israelis have been criticized worldwide, even by American leaders at some points for building them. And yet, I could see just from my own unprofessional eye that they're needed, because if you didn't have those Jewish neighborhoods and communities within those bigger swaths of land that are controlled by Palestinians, it would be very dangerous for Israel. And so even just having those communities there, it's sort of a national security feature, and it's really needed. Plus, I read this week that housing prices are going up in Israel, and Netanyahu's being criticized for that. That's exactly right. I mean, one of the things that's very interesting, again, about the settlements is that some people don't even know they live in a settlement. Some of them, are really in the suburbs of Jerusalem, where it is very hard to get a place to live. And so, some of that territory is on the other side of the Green Line, as we would say. And the Green Line is what the process has determined divides Israel from what would be the Palestinian territory. So those are considered to be, quote, settlements. But, some people aren't even aware they live in them. And the fact is that the economy is a big issue in Israel right now. I'm reading the Israeli papers in the lead up to the elections, and that is really the number one issue for them. The economy in Israel is very difficult for a lot of people. And while there is a lot of growth in the high-tech area and some of those areas, it's very hard for the average person to live reasonably in Israel right now. Dale, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm glad to, I know that I've interviewed you years ago on books, but I'm glad to discover your passion for making people understand these terms, and we'll have to do some more of that.
I'd love it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. That's Dale Hanson Bourke, and we will continue to discuss the speech. Louie Gohmert will join us at some point. We hope you join us. We've got some folks waiting on the line. Thank you for being patient. We will continue to take your calls here at Point of View. The number, again, is 800-351-1212. And certainly we're talking about negotiating right now in Geneva with Iran. This is a nation that's gobbling up countries, and they'll find more to gobble up when they have nuclear power. So that's why this is of such great concern. We'll discuss it more right after this on Point of View.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
You know, I have noticed over the last few months that a number of commentators have been trying to minimize the threat from terrorism. Perhaps they're doing it because they don't want us to overreact to the social media videos of burnings and beheadings. Some may not want America to be drawn into another war. Whatever the reason, there seems to be a concerted effort to minimize the terrorist threat. One writer calculated that since 9/11, a grand total of 30 Americans have been killed in terrorist incidents inside the United States. The odds of an American being killed by terrorism are lower than being killed in a car accident or killed in a building fire. He added that Americans are 4 times more likely to be struck by lightning than killed by a terrorist. Now, if you believe the United States is spending too much in terms of blood and treasure fighting terrorism, you could use this argument. Of course, you could have made the same argument in America before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. How many Americans were killed by the Axis powers in the 1930s? Your chances of being killed by Nazi soldiers or soldiers of the Japanese Imperial Army were effectively 0. Even after 9/11, you could make the case that most Americans and nearly all of our other cities were unaffected by the terrorist attack on that day. You could even point to the fact that except for the World Trade Towers and part of the Pentagon, all the other buildings in America were intact and unaffected by the 9/11 terrorist attack. Charles Cook uses an extreme example to make his point. Imagine that 100 planes crashed into other important business and government buildings. That would have been devastating. But still, most of the homes, churches, libraries, malls, hotels, and gas stations would be intact. Would the citizens of America have been comforted if George W. Bush appeared on TV to say that America was still, statistically speaking, safe and unaffected by the events of the day? We shouldn't overreact to the threat of terrorism, but we don't need to use statistical arguments to minimize the threat either. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
My name is Penna Dexter. I'm hosting for Kirby Anderson today, and the topic today is the speech by the Israel leader, Netanyahu, in Washington, D.C., before a joint session of Congress. And we're taking your calls at 800-351-1212. What did you think of the speech? Do you have a comment on it? Let's go to Lee in the state of Georgia. Hi, Lee. You're on Point of View.
Hello. Yes,
Thanks
ma'am.
for calling.
Thank you so much for taking my call. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the speech this morning, and I just wanted to say that I think our president can really take notes from that on being a strong leader, and I just hope and pray that our next president is a strong leader like the Prime Minister is. There's just a lot to be learned. It was really eye-opening.
Yeah, he did seem leader-like as he made the speech, and certainly knowledgeable, didn't he?
Yes, ma'am. And I just want to say, too, that it's kind of unfortunate. I'm glad that he came here, but it's kind of unfortunate that we have to get a speech like this from someone and not our president, addressing our Congress or the American people on something like this, And it's just...
Well, I think there's room for a lot of leaders to give speeches, and this was certainly informative coming from the leader of Israel.
Yes, ma'am. You're correct. I agree 200%. I mean, it was just well taken. I thought he'd done a very good job.
Thank you so much for calling in, Lee.
Thank you.
It was pointed out by Quinn Hillier, and the Family Research Council wrote this in their update yesterday, that the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, has spent more of his formative years in the U.S. on the U.S. mainland than Obama, and that he seems to understand the crisis that this president is so eager to ignore, and also that, he's very popular here. And our president's becoming less popular in many cases. He commands a lot of respect, And you could see why. He gave us a lot of information. And over the weekend, Obama sent out his attack dogs. Secretary of State Kerry basically sent out a threat through different channels about spilling any secrets of the deal that's being negotiated. And Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, also did. She said that the speech, or Netanyahu, is injecting a degree of partisanship, which is not only unfortunate, I think it's destructive of the fabric of the relationship. So that might be a question I would have for you, is do you think the speech was destructive of our relationship with Israel? I don't. I think it was good. He was very friendly, even to Harry Reid. So anyway, we'll continue to take your calls, 800-351-1212. In another clip from the speech, of course, this deal that we are hearing about that's being negotiated, it does, the one that we think may be happening right now, it lays down some restrictions on their centrifuges and their enrichment of uranium, but they expire in 10 years. And as Mr. Netanyahu pointed out, 10 years may be a long time in politics. It's a short time in the life of a country. And this is about the life of a country, Israel, and it's also about really the peace of the world. He said it's a blink of the eye in the life of a nation, 10 years. But after 10 years, Iran would be free to do what it wanted to under this deal. And he also said that 190,000 centrifuges will be enriching uranium in Iran, according to the plans that he knows about in Iran. He says once that decision is made to get nuclear capability with what they've got in place now, it would be very quick for them to have the fuel for nuclear bombs. And he also talked about their sponsorship of terrorism all over the world. They would then become a sponsor of nuclear terrorism. And so that's what's scary. He also mentioned that the intercontinental ballistic missile, which threatens the United States, this is the missile that has a long range. This program is not even part of the deal that's being discussed by our Secretary of State and these other world leaders. And that is absolutely crazy. That's got to be part of the deal if they're going to have one. Well, let's just go back to a few clips from the speech. Netanyahu said that it's time to walk away from what's on the table in Switzerland.
We've been told that no deal is better than a bad deal. Well, this is a bad deal. It's a very bad deal. We're better off without it.
It's a bad deal, and we're better off without it. And it really does pave the way to Iran's path to the bomb. And in another piece of audio from that speech, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says America shouldn't be making concessions to Iran. Instead, we should be taking a hard line.
Now, if Iran threatens to walk away from the table, and this often happens in a Persian bazaar, call their bluff. They'll be back, because they need the deal a lot more than you do.
And that's very true. They do need the deal because the sanctions that we've been placing on them have actually been working, affecting their economy, and then the oil prices have been dropping. So they're a bit desperate. And instead of giving away the store here, we should be standing a little bit tougher in these negotiations and taking advantage of this. But I think the reason we don't is because the folks that are doing the negotiating for us think that Iran is an important country to be an ally with, and they trust them more than they should. They have not learned from history and from the ideology that controls their leaders, or that those leaders ascribe to. And so they have a misguided sense of trust, I think, and that's unfortunate. Let's continue to take some calls. We've got Steve in Texas. Steve, you're on Point of View.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Great.
Well, I just want to thank the Lord that we have Christian radio in Texas, and I wasn't able to watch, but I was able to listen on KBJS. And I just think that Netanyahu extended a level of grace to the Democratic Party, which was they couldn't have been ready for that. I think it was very gracious. And I don't see that we as America need to be making concessions with Iran. And I think whatever agreement we did make with them, they couldn't be trusted to keep it, and never have.
Yeah, whether they keep it or they don't keep it, it's a bad deal. Well, listen, thank you so much for calling, Steve. We appreciate your joining the conversation today. And now perhaps we can get some clarification from one who was there. Louie Gohmert, Congressman from East Texas, is on the line. Louie, thank you for calling in.
Okay, thank you, Penna. Well, I've enjoyed listening to the show while I was waiting.
Well, good. I'm sorry to keep you waiting.
No.
I didn't know you were there for that whole time.
No. But anyway, I enjoyed hearing the clips again of Obama. What am I thinking? Of Netanyahu's speech. But what struck me, Penna, is it really seemed like a speech that a United States president should have given, where you lay out the case of what is the most danger facing the United States and our allies, and what can we do about it, and what's a good deal and what's a bad deal. And I just thought it was excellent, and the reference earlier to Esther I thought was excellent. And I mentioned as he was leaving, I said, you may be the Esther for the United States.
Did you get to talk to him for a second?
He came in, I spoke to him, and then when he came out, I was thanking him for the speech, and I did tell him, I said, that was a speech an American president should have given. Thank you. You may be our Esther for the United States.
Well, some of our callers today have said the same thing, that he seems so presidential, and I think we're longing for that in America again. We're longing for someone also with that firm grasp of foreign policy, and that's what I wanted to ask you. We only have about a minute before the break. Can you stick with us after the break?
Okay. All
right. Thank you. But just very quickly, tell me, what you thought about kind of the way he laid out the case.
Oh, I thought it was excellent. But the people kept saying that he's making it too political. And the only people that were making this speech political were Democrats, who were saying it was political, because from an Israeli standpoint, this is about existence. This is about being allowed not to have nuclear bombs go off in your country. And, we can be glib and cavalier over here, but my gosh, they're sitting there, and we are enabling a country that has made clear that they're going to be worse than Hitler was to the Jews and to America, and we're playing patty cake with him. And we should never have allowed these kind of talks to go on until Iran agreed to give up the centrifuges.
Congressman Louie Gohmert is my guest. We will continue our discussion after the break. Stay with us for more of Point of View.
Maybe you've noticed, but Christians find many things to disagree about. But one thing that all true Christians do is pray. Point of View Radio has a plan to help you join with your family from sea to shining sea and pray for America. It starts by getting our new booklet, Pray for America, and we'll also send you occasional reminders and updates on special needs to pray for. One need that we know about is to pray for the Supreme Court. Over the next few months, they're considering the definition of marriage and whether or not to force every state to accept the fiction of so-called same-sex marriage. When the foundation of your house is compromised, the entire structure is in danger, and this decision may seriously undermine our culture's foundation and fuel a growing attack on religious freedom. Please visit our website. Look for the Pray for America picture on the right side of our homepage. You may have to scroll down just a bit. pointofview.net. Join people all across the land and pray for America. Visit right now, pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
The backstory of this speech by Netanyahu today is that right after the speech, President Obama had a conference call with European leaders about the deal with Iran. John Kerry, the Secretary of State in Geneva, Switzerland, also in the negotiations over this deal. And this is one more clip from the speech where Netanyahu says one of the worst things about the deal is that its toughest restrictions last just 10 years, which he says is a short time in the life of a nation. After that time, Iran could quickly produce fuel for lots of nuclear bombs.
The foremost sponsor of global terrorism could be weeks away from having enough enriched uranium for an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons, and this with full international legitimacy.
And Louie Gohmert is with me from the 1st District of Texas. Louie was there. And Louie, I think he spoke truth today. Some of his statements were very disturbing, but they were true. And this was one of them, wasn't it?
Well, it was, but it's even worse than he allowed himself to say. I know he was trying to be diplomatic and not make President Obama and Secretary Kerry look too bad. But I was visiting Steve King and Dana Rohrabacher, and I were visiting with the IAEA inspectors, the ones that are actually in charge of the inspections in Iran, and they are intending to, and they are continuing to spin their centrifuges. They've been adding centrifuges, and he is exactly right when he says they could be weeks away from having an arsenal of nuclear weapons. But Penna, they don't have to wait 10 years. Just like with North Korea, when the same person who is in charge of the negotiating with Iran was helping and advising on the deal that was done by the Clinton administration with North Korea. Same people involved. It's just incredible. And they didn't learn anything from the deal they did with North Korea when North Korea promised, we promise you let us have all this, do this, and we promise we will not use it for nuclear weapons. And, of course, they get into the deal and they break their promise and they don't let inspectors come in. They develop nukes. And actually, we don't have to wait 10 years. They will have enough enriched uranium, plutonium, that they can go directly into an arsenal just in a matter of just the next few years. They don't have to wait 10. And I would expect that these people are so dishonest and so hateful that and filled with hate for Jews and Christians that they won't wait. I mean, they're already responsible for more Americans being killed in Iraq than anybody else during the Iraq War. They're behind the Houthis, as he mentioned, in Yemen, that the president in September held up as being this great bastion of American success, when actually in September when he said it, the Iranian-backed Houthis were already taking over the country. I know because I was helping a constituent get out from the embassy back then. So this president is, when it comes to radical Islam and its hate for Jews and Christians, he really is delusional, and it is just incredible. But then, I don't know if you saw the story, but there was a story that did not emanate from Israel that Obama had threatened to shoot down Israeli planes if they went into Iran. And we haven't gotten confirmation for that. As we know the Obama administration leaked when Israel was getting ready to defend itself. It's called self-defense. And the U.S. the Obama administration leaked that they were going to use Azerbaijan airspace. And so that killed that effort by Israel to protect itself. It is just incredible. The Egyptian government under El-Sisi is fighting every day against the weaponized radical Islamists that Morsi helped in the Sinai that are a threat to Israel. And El-Sisi, I've met with him a few times, he's begging for the parts to the Apache helicopters, the F-16s that were promised. They've been put in storage, as I understand it. And El-Sisi has said to me and a couple others over there in Cairo in our last meeting a couple months ago, does your president not understand we use the Apaches to keep the Suez Canal open and to fight the radical Islamists in the Sinai that are a threat to Israel? Does he not want to protect Israel? Does he not want to keep the Suez Canal open? We don't understand why we're not getting more help from the United States. And it is hard for people to understand. I don't know if you saw the story, but it was reported from Nigeria that this administration said unless you change your law to allow same-sex marriage, then we're not going to help you against the radical Islamist Boko Haram, which is killing Christians, having young girls raped and sold into sex slavery. I mean, it is incredible the way this administration is turning its back on Christians and Jews around the world. And I am very afraid, since I know, as Abraham Lincoln quoted from the Old Testament, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Doesn't matter how many people in America are faithful followers, we have put into place leaders who may bring down judgment on the United States if we don't start helping the good guys.
Well, Iran may be one of the judgments of the United States. But, Louie, I wanted to ask you, because you said in the last segment that we should have never gotten into these talks. And, I mean, that is so true. But now that we're in them, what should be our course of action?
It's never too late to do the right thing. And you can write that down. It's never too late to do the right thing. And right now would be the time to tell the Iranians, look, you've been playing us for fools, and we're not playing anymore. Stop the centrifuges, start dismantling, and then we'll continue the talks. And we are going to tighten the sanctions. We're not keeping them loosened as Obama has. We're toughening the sanctions. They're going to get tougher than you would ever believe. And you are going to hurt, and the people of this country will demand your ouster, and Allah will turn on you because you will be gone because of the pressure we're going to bring to bear unless you sit down and honestly and openly deal with this issue of denuclearizing you in Iran. It's not too late to do that.
You know, Susan Rice and Samantha Power, I mean, they seem to insist, all their spokespeople, that don't worry that we are going to stop their nuclear program. They will not get a nuclear weapon. But it almost seems like our administration wants them to become a nuclear power.
Yeah, and you're going to have to help me. I'm trying to remember. Susan Rice, was she the one that was sent out to go on Sunday show after Sunday show?
You know good and well she was after Benghazi.
Lying repeatedly, knowing that it was never about the video. We've now seen email that Judicial Watch got through a court order here last week, where hours after the attack, there was no mention of a video. It was an attack. It was radical Islamic group. They knew that, but they had to change the story, and it gives more support for Ed Klein in his book on Blood Feud, about the feud between Clintons and the Obamas. His version, his story was in his book that Hillary Clinton called her husband. She was livid. She said Obama wanted her to go out and say it was about a video, the attack, and she just thought that was nuts. And Bill said, nobody will believe that. You can't go out and say it was about a video. And they thought about her resigning, but then they believed if she resigned, she couldn't get nominated because Democrats would be mad at her. So she better just tough it out. But whatever you do, don't let them make you go out on Sunday. Get them to send somebody else. So that was Susan Rice, and she went out. And whether she knew she was lying or not, she went out and fabricated in show after show. And we know that either she does not have any integrity or judgment, because if she did, she either knew she was lying when she went on the shows, or she has no integrity, because a person of integrity, when they found out they were sent out to spread lies, would have resigned immediately.
Yeah.
And she didn't. She's still out there, just defending them. So a real problem there.
A big problem. Louie, I'm glad you're there. Thank you for what you do and for always being so courageous. And thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
I always love talking to you in person or on the air, Penna. Thanks so much.
Okay, Louie, take care. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bless you.
That is Representative Louie Gohmert of Texas, and he is a courageous and brave member of Congress. He really says what he believes and what he's convicted by the Lord, and we need more like him. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Got this piece of news today from Liberty Institute. I hope Kelly Shackelford is in on Friday because it would be timely to talk about this. Yesterday, one of their cases had to do with an Orthodox Jewish congregation not too far from the studio, maybe 30 minutes from here, and in Dallas. And this congregation, Torres Shem, which is a small Orthodox Jewish community in North Dallas, won a case. They won the right to meet in a neighborhood. One disgruntled neighbor got a couple of others together, and they tried to push this community out. They meet in a private home for prayer, worship, and religious study. They're Orthodox, so they have to walk. They can't drive to worship, and so that's why they meet in this home. And they won. But now the city of Dallas has sued the congregation. So it's going a little higher. Before it was like the homeowners association. A few people in that association were suing. So the city of Dallas has brought out their big guns against this small Orthodox Jewish community in North Dallas. And Liberty Institute will be defending them. I'm sure Kelly will tell you more about it. But, you know, he's always talking about standing for what is right, standing against attacks. And that's what Benjamin Netanyahu also spoke about when he was before the joint session of Congress. That was an inspiring part of this talk. And he really said that the world needs to unite to end Iran's domination of its neighbors and also its support for terrorism. I mean, these are basic defense mechanisms, and Israel's the only one standing against it in that part of the world. Well, not only Israel, some Muslim countries are also, and we need to help them not stand against it. But anyway, he also said that we should not reward really Iran with the recognition of its nuclear program. Instead, we need to stand.
We must all stand together to stop Iran's march of conquest, subjugation, and terror.
It was really telling it like it is. And again, we're taking your calls. We'd love to hear your comments on the speech. We've appreciated you participating in the program. And before I take another call, I want to thank everybody here, Catherine and Andrew, for putting together all the clips for us. These aren't anything that we got from a news service. We picked them out. And so thank you guys for doing that today. We really kind of made the program. Let's go to Linda in Georgia. Hi, Linda. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, I'm so happy to be able to express my opinion.
I'm glad you're here doing it.
Frustration. Thank you very much. And I want to thank Fox for putting it on when I heard on this station that the other networks did not. So
right. Fox did, and a few other cable outlets did.
They continue to try to keep the truth from the people, I believe. But I am so disappointed that our country can't be united on such an important issue and such an important time for Israel. And I just continue to see that Obama's loyalty is not to us, that he and his followers, which I don't understand how so many Democrats can continue to follow and approve. In my heart, I don't believe they all approve. I think they're just following him and neglecting to be the leader that we need.
You know, it's impossible to be united. I mean, we would be, if we considered unity as our greatest goal or value right now, if we believers did, then we would not be doing what God has called us to do. We can't be united with those positions.
Right. Well, you're right. And but I'm just sad when I see so many people stand up and speak so harshly.
I agree with you.
Being a Christian, and I pray for Mr. Netanyahu and for their country. And, I mean, just because they're so close over there in the Middle East to Iran and all, we're all in danger, you know.
Yeah, well, we need them to stay free, and then we need to keep Iran from getting a weapon that can reach us.
Absolutely. But I just want to encourage other listeners and believers to really pray for him and pray for Israel. And
thank you. Thank you for that encouragement. And pray for America.
Absolutely.
In fact, that's what we're encouraging here at Point of View. You can find out more about that by going to pointofview.net. But really, in the speech, Benjamin Netanyahu gave 3 points that should be requirements before we made any kind of a deal. Stop aggression against their neighbors. Iran needs to stop aggression against their neighbors in the Middle East, number one. Number two, they need to stop supporting terrorism around the world. And number three, they need to stop threatening to annihilate, he said, my country, Israel. And also, and of course, Israel's the one and only Jewish state. And so, that's where he brought it down to the security of Israel. And so, they need to change their behavior before any kind of a deal is signed. And at the very least, said Netanyahu, by the time the deal expires, and what we're hearing that's coming out of Geneva doesn't even require that. If Iran, he said, wants to be treated like a normal country, let it act like a normal country. And it's amazing that the United States would allow this behavior and actually recognize it enough to negotiate with it. He also said that it's not inevitable, as some people say, that Iran would get a nuclear weapon. That nuclear know-how, which they do have, and that's the argument people are using, but nuclear know-how without an infrastructure doesn't get you very much. So he says we should keep up the pressure because their regime is very vulnerable right now economically, the drop in oil prices. And if we keep sanctions on them, they'll be even more vulnerable. And really to call their bluff. And, of course, we heard him say they need the deal more than we do. No deal is better than a bad deal. This is a bad deal, and you're better off without it. I love that line. And he said we are at a crossroads. And really, it is a crossroads. It's either going to be a nuclear-armed Iran and war, or we could have another path. We could have a better deal to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. If we are strong in our negotiations and use some common sense, we could prevent a nuclear Middle East. That would be, he said, the difficult path, and it would make all the difference for the future of his country, Israel, and also for the Middle East, and really the peace of the entire world. He said standing up to Iran will not be easy, and it certainly won't. Then he... of course, this was getting near the end of the speech. He introduced the Nobel Prize winner and also Holocaust survivor Eli Wiesel, I think is the way you say his name. He was there with Alan Dershowitz in the audience. And he said we need to learn from the past. And we do. We need to learn from these leaders who say these things. We need to take them at their word that they mean it. And so Netanyahu... also, I mean, just going back to the idea that if we make a deal with them, it's probably going to be a bad deal. But also, they're probably not going to keep it. They have this reputation. They've been caught time and time again doing secret nuclear work.
Now, I know this is not going to come as a shock to any of you, but Iran not only defies inspectors, it also plays a pretty good game of hide and cheat with them.
And he appealed again near the end of his speech to the fact that Israel and the Jews have been vulnerable. He says we're no longer scattered among the nations. We are able to defend ourselves. And he pretty much promised that they will, but certainly appealed to the United States to stand with them and not against them. Well, that's the speech. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. Kirby will be back here tomorrow. I know that Gary Bauer will be joining Kirby for a good hunk of the program to unpack this a little bit more, and that will be something to look forward to. So I hope that you will join us again. I want to thank you again, Andrew, and also Catherine and Chris, for all your work behind the scenes. And I mean, I think that this situation in our foreign policy plays up the need to pray for not only Israel, but also the United States of America. Point of View is really in the thick of that battle, and we encourage you to join us with that. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Are you ever frustrated with America's leaders? I know. Are you ever not frustrated? So, what are you doing about it? In Proverbs chapter 21, the Spirit of God hits us with this: the king's heart, and we could say the president's heart, the senator's heart, the congressman's heart, the Supreme Court justice's heart, is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wishes. Your prayers unleash the most powerful weapon in the universe. If you're in union with Jesus Christ, your prayers touch God's heart. So again, what are you doing about your frustrations with government? Point of View Radio is spearheading a new effort to get as many as possible to pray for America. It starts when you visit our website, pointofview.net, and click on the Pray for America picture on the right side of the page. We'll send you our Pray for America booklet and updates on things to pray for. We must pray. Click in now to pointofview.net and pray for America. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.